Hey everybody, it's Chris, and in my last video I discussed the Wild Magic Surge table for Wild Magic Sorcerers. Now I want to discuss the rest of the subclass. In this video, I'm going to analyze the features, I'm going to evaluate them, compare them to other Sorcerer subclasses, I'm going to provide recommendations for the best use of them, I'm going to give you an overall subclass evaluation, and then I'm going to discuss if we want a multiclass, what the breakpoints would be for Wild Magic Sorcerer. So to start with, Sorcerer subclasses get features at levels 3, 6, 14, and 18. And we're going to start with level 3, and I'm going to be analyzing the two listed level 3 features as a single feature. So let me explain. We start with Wild Magic Surge. It says your spellcasting can unleash surges of untamed magic. Once per turn, you can roll a d20 immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot. If you roll a 20, roll on the Wild Magic Surge table to create a magical effect. If the magical effect is a spell, it is too wild to be affected by metamagic. Then we get the Wild Magic Surge table after that. And then we get Tides of Chaos, which says you can manipulate chaos itself to give yourself advantage on a d20 test before you roll the d20. Once you do so, you must cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot or finish a long rest before you can use this feature again. If you do cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot before you finish a long rest, you automatically roll on the Wild Magic Surge table. So, there's two questions about the interactions of these two parts. Number one, if we automatically roll on the Wild Magic Surge table due to Tides of Chaos, does that mean that we no longer roll the d20? Is there some indication that the Wild Magic Surge table is limited to once per spell slot? Otherwise, you would roll on the Wild Magic Surge table because you automatically do after Tides of Chaos, and then you would roll a d20, and if you rolled a 20, you would roll on the Wild Magic Surge table again, potentially getting 2 Wild Magic Surges for one spell. The second question is, if we automatically roll on the Wild Magic Surge table due to Tides of Chaos, is it too wild to be affected by metamagic? Because that restriction is written as if it applies to Wild Magic Surge, but it is not repeated under Tides of Chaos. And I think there are two ways that these features could be read. Specifically, I'm talking about Tides of Chaos and Wild Magic Surge. And depending on how we read them, they answer these questions differently. So the first way we could read them is that Wild Magic Surge and Tides of Chaos are independent features, and they operate separately. If that's how you read it, in this case, you should roll the d20 for Wild Magic Surge, even if replenishing Tides of Chaos triggers a Wild Magic Surge, meaning we can potentially surge twice after the same spell casting. Also in this case, metamagic cannot be applied to the result from the Wild Magic Surge table only if it is triggered from the Wild Magic Surge feature. If it is triggered from Tides of Chaos, then presumably there's no restriction on metamagic. The second way we can read this is Wild Magic Surge is a general rule for the operation of the Wild Magic Surge table, and Tides of Chaos provides a specific to how it operates. In this case, rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table automatically would be instead of rolling the d20, and also in this case, the restriction on metamagic would still apply. Now, I'm not going to tell you, and I'm not going to tell your DM, how they need to read these features. I personally look at them the second way, where automatically rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table due to Tides of Chaos is instead of rolling the d20, and the restriction on metamagic still applies. Therefore, my advice here will be assuming that you're reading it the same way. So based on that reading, we're evaluating these two features as a package deal. Now, as a Wild Magic Sorcerer, we have a lot of control how often we roll on the Wild Magic Surge table. This is a huge change from the 2014 version where the DM had all the control. Basically, if we use Tides of Chaos as often as we can between the casting of sorcerer spells with spell slots, then we can have our Wild Magic Surge with Wild Magic pretty regularly. In my last video, which I'm going to link above, I did a deep analysis of the Wild Magic Surge table, and I determined some things that I am going to repeat here. The Surge table is so much weighted towards positive results, surging is generally optimal despite it being unpredictable. This is another big change from the 2014 rule set, where Wild Magic surging was probably a net negative mechanically. Number 2, positive surges tend to provide combat benefits. So taking steps to surge in combat is going to be more optimal than surging outside of combat. Outside of combat, you're far more likely to get results that are ineffectual. Number 3, the odds of surging are low, 5%, unless we've expended our Tides of Chaos feature, in which case it's 100%. So in order to expend our Tides of Chaos, we must roll a test. Number 4, initiative is a test. Specifically, it's a dexterity check. So expending Tides of Chaos to get advantage on initiative is basically a no-brainer. A Wild Magic Sorcerer should be rolling with advantage on initiative no less often than an assassin, a champion, or a barbarian. Expending at least a first level spell in combat should be easily accomplished by a level 3 sorcerer. Number 5, after our initial surge, which will likely be on round 1, then we need to make another d20 test in order to expend Tides of Chaos if we want to access that Wild Magic Surge table automatically again. That means we need either an ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll. Now, saving throws can happen when we don't expect them, but ability checks and attack rolls are something we have a fair amount of control over. And I'll mention number 6, advantage doesn't stack, but it can be applied more than once to the same test. So, for example, we could use Tides of Chaos to apply advantage to an attack roll with a sorcerer spell, even if we already have advantage through innate sorcery. However, number 7, if we do that, then we might not have Tides of Chaos available if we need it for a saving throw that maybe comes in the meantime. So this is my recommendation. Use Tides of Chaos for every initiative roll. Then follow it up with a sorcerer spell with a spell slot, normally on round 1. This is probably the best round to be spending spell slots anyways. But I would favor innate sorcery over Tides of Chaos for granting advantage on attack rolls. If we are out of innate sorcery uses, then Tides of Chaos can work as a backup. But otherwise, we might want to save our Tides of Chaos for saving throws that we might not expect. I would consider applying Tides of Chaos to an attack roll that already has advantage only if I'm feeling secure about my safety. If there's a decent chance of a saving throw being needed before my next Wild Magic Surge, it's probably not worth it. Outside of combat, Tides of Chaos as needed, but I wouldn't be clamoring for a chance to use it because you want it available for initiative. And Wild Magic Surges outside of combat are just going to be less optimal. So, if you're outside of combat and you feel the need to get advantage, by all means, but don't look for those opportunities. Now, in combat, there are ways to get additional tests without disrupting spellcasting. We can't just make ability checks because normally an ability check requires an action. So, for example, with 2 levels of rogue, you can make a dexterity stealth check to hide as a bonus action. And you could expend Tides of Chaos on that. I'm not advocating for 2 levels of rogue in general, but you know what? If it's part of your build, that is a method to expend Tides of Chaos to consider. And I am going to discuss the possibility of a rogue multiclass later in this video. There are also feats like Observant and Keen Mind that can give you a bonus action ability check, but neither feat is optimal for a sorcerer to take, so I wouldn't recommend either of them, even though they would give us more chances to replenish our Tides of Chaos. I find that a lot of DMs will call for ability checks without the expense of any kind of action, even though the rules don't really work that way. Like, I want to jump over an obstacle and they ask me for a dexterity acrobatics check. These kinds of checks are an easy way to expend Tides of Chaos to set up your next Wild Magic Surge. Note that only sorcerer spells cast with a spell slot can surge, so your cantrips will never surge, nor will spells that you gain through feats, through multiclassing, through magic items, nor your species traits. With all of that, how powerful is Wild Magic compared to other sorcerer subclasses at level 3? I would argue it is the most powerful sorcerer subclass at level 3. Not because of Wild Magic Surges, which are probably a net benefit, but because of Tides of Chaos giving us advantage on pretty much every important test that we're going to have to make. If it was just initiative advantage, it would already be a powerful feature, but this is advantage on likely every initiative test, most important saving throws, and occasional attack rolls and ability checks. That is an extreme level of power. Now, on the other hand, the main loss for playing a Wild Magic Sorcerer has to be the fewer known spells. This is not as big a disadvantage as it used to be. Clockwork and Aberrant Mind can no longer switch their free spells, and the advantage of knowing something like Arms of Hadar or Protection from Energy is fairly limited. Also, sorcerers have more spell preparations than they used to have through their base class alone. Here is the difference. I'm going to put it up on your screen. As we can see, by level 3, when you get your subclass, there is already a substantial increase in prepared spells from the previous rules, and the gap widens the more levels are gained. In fact, by level 3, your increase to spells prepared is 50% over the 2014 rule set. So, the additional prepared spells, particularly with Aberrant Mind and Clockwork Soul, used to be a massive advantage for those subclasses, but with less customization options for them, the value of these features is less dramatic. And that's why I still think Wild Magic comes out ahead at level 3. Then we get to level 6 and Bend Luck. You have the ability to twist fate using your Wild Magic. Immediately after another creature you can see rolls the d20 for a d20 test, you can take a reaction and spend 1 sorcery point to roll a d4, then you can apply the number rolled as a bonus or a penalty, your choice, to the d20 roll. So I do have one interaction question here, and that is, can you bend luck on yourself? So I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to bring it up just in case it's controversial. I'm not sure if it is or not. The feature says immediately after another creature you can see, and the word another to me says that they mean somebody other than you. Now, if you disagree, then that's why I bring this up, because I'm not certain everyone will agree, but that is how I'm reading it, and that's how I'm going to evaluate it. So, evaluation. The first thing to take notice of is the feature appeared in the 2014 rule set as well, but at twice the cost. It costs 2 sorcery points. At a cost of 1 sorcery point, I consider this feature a massive bargain. It is probably the most powerful thing you can do with a single sorcery point. There are 3 factors that I think make this feature powerful. Number 1, you use this feature after the test has been made. So the target of our spell made their saving throw, but maybe just barely, so we can use this feature. That's way more powerful than needing to guess beforehand if we need a d4 penalty. Number 2, the d4 modifier has no saving throw. It works every time. This makes it combine with something like innate sorcery to make our spells that much harder to resist, because innate sorcery is giving us a +1 modifier to our spell save DCs, and then if we cast a spell at an enemy and use Bend Luck, that d4 penalty is essentially giving us a +1d4 DC on top of the +1. This is also a massive buff to allies for that important attack roll that they just missed, or that important saving throw that they just missed. There is also no range limit on this feature, and that is very impressive and important. If we can see them, then we can use this. In theory, if our sorcerer had a crystal ball, we could use this on targets on the other side of the world. But speaking practically, and things that will actually come up in your game, spells and features that penalize enemies normally have range limits. Sometimes it's like 30 feet. Having no range limit puts Bend Luck in that special category with features like a Diviner's Portent that are very, very good. So this is a great feature, but if I compare it to level 6 of the other subclasses, there's only one other sorcerer subclass that I think might even have a more powerful level 6 feature, and that's Aberrant Mind. But these levels are comparable for the 2 subclasses. But compared to Draconic, Clockwork, even Divine Soul, Storm, Shadow, and Lunar, if we want to look at older content, this feature is more powerful than anything those subclasses get at level 6. So here is my general advice. I'm going to talk about initiative again. This can be used on initiative, But if you're going to use Bend Luck on initiative, I want you to consider carefully whether you want to provide the D4 bonus to an ally or the D4 penalty to the enemy. In a vacuum, it would make no difference. But with other allies and potentially other enemies involved, one of these options might be significantly more valuable than the other. Also, remember you can't give yourself a plus D4 to initiative, but you can give that enemy that just beat you in initiative a minus D4, and that's probably going to work out the same. But if we look at the initiative order, we can usually tell whether a D4 penalty is more likely to put more allies ahead, or a D4 boost is more likely to put an ally ahead of more enemies. Also, you should keep in mind Bend Luck uses your reaction. That means you cannot use it more than once between turns, and if you do use it, you're not going to be casting Shield, you're not going to be casting Counterspell until your turn comes up. So consider your safety, and if it is in jeopardy, the cost of using that reaction might be a lot higher than the cost of the one sorcery point. Then we get to level 14 and we have Controlled Chaos. You gain a modicum of control over the surges of your wild magic. Whenever you roll on the wild magic surge table, you can roll twice and use either number. Now, once we have this feature, surging wild magic becomes pretty safe. The chances of a bad result drop from about 13% to about 2%. The chance of really good results, like maximum damage on the next spell cast, or disadvantage on saving throws for the next spell cast, also becomes significantly higher. This is obviously a very nice feature, though in comparison to other sorcerers, 14th level tends to be quite good amongst pretty much all the sorcerer subclasses. I don't think wild magic stands out at level 14, but they are benefiting greatly at level 14 just as the rest are. One thing I did note in the last video, I'm going to repeat it, is that a lot of beneficial wild magic surge results do not scale with our level, and they become less relevant. So by 14th level, by the time we get this feature, our chance of getting a fairly inconsequential result is actually still quite high, because a lot of things that maybe had some significance at lower levels won't anymore. Then we get the final feature at level 18, Tamed Surge. Immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot, you can create an effect of your choice from the Wild Magic Surge table instead of rolling on that table. You can choose any effect in the table except for the final row, and if the chosen effect involves a roll, you must still make the roll. So once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you complete a long rest. And there's no expend a certain number of sorcery points option as an alternative here. It is going to be once per long rest. There are 3 results on the Wild Magic Surge table, other than the final row, that isn't allowed for you to pick that involve a roll. That's 5 to 8, where you might summon a Unicorn, Modron, or Flumph. 17 to 20, where the results are mainly just silly. And 57 to 60, where you cast a random spell. With 5 to 8, you roll a d4, and on a 1, 2, or 3, the result is going to be basically irrelevant by 14th level. And with level 4, you get a Unicorn, which is still relevant, but way less dramatic than it used to be. So this option is likely not worth choosing. With 17 to 20, you're basically wasting your feature. With 57 to 60, casting Confusion or even Magic Missile would be good, but this result really runs the gambit in terms of good results, bad results, and irrelevant results. So I probably wouldn't select it. So that leaves us with predictable results only, and there are 3 of them that stand out. 13 to 16, creatures have disadvantage on saving throws against the next spell you cast in the next minute that involves a saving throw. This plus an upcast hold monster would be exceptionally potent. Then we have 29 to 32. The next time you cast a spell that deals damage within the next minute, don't roll the spell's damage dice for damage. Instead, use the highest number possible for each damage die. So the obvious combination here is combine this with Meteor Swarm. After all, we're 18th level, and that would be 240 points of damage to everybody in the area, or save for half, but still very potent. And then 53 through 56. You can take 1 extra action this turn. Although you have expended a spell slot in order to get this result, and therefore can't spend another spell slot, by 18th level, you probably have some nice scrolls or a nice magical staff, so there's a really good chance you can do something impactful with that extra action. So my evaluation of this feature, honestly, this is the least exciting feature of the entire subclass, and that is due to the incredibly harsh limit of once per long rest. But is it worth getting to level 18 in Sorcerer? Well, I gotta say, if I'm making a Sorcerer, level 17 obviously does stand out because of access to 9th level spells. And if I'm gonna do 17 levels, then I probably want to do 19 levels to get an epic boon feat, and I'm gonna get this in the middle. So I probably would. So my recommendation is, if you're gonna go 17 levels anyways, then going 19 does make a lot of sense, despite this feature not being a standout. However, overall, I consider the Wild Magic Sorcerer as good as any other Sorcerer subclass, potentially better than any other Sorcerer subclass, depending on what level we take it to. But at lower levels, like if I'm level 3, I definitely consider this the most powerful Sorcerer subclass right now. Now, I'm going to talk about multiclassing here and breakpoints, and I should mention that when I consider breakpoints, I place a high value on ability score increases and spell level increases, particularly 3rd level spells and 9th level spells. That means the obvious breakpoints for Wild Magic Sorcerer in my evaluation are level 5, because you get Tides of Chaos and 3rd level spells, and you're only 1 level past an ability score increase. Level 6, so that we can pick up Bend Luck. Level 8, the main subclass features here are gained, and we have decent spell casting, and we give up no ability score increases. This one is a very tempting level for a breakpoint. Level 19, you get an epic boon feat, and you get all the subclass features, and you get 9th level spells, and we can still dip. Or go straight 20, because sorcerers have a good capstone. This is a good subclass. I think a straight class 20 level Wild Magic Sorcerer would be very effective. But I'll discuss some obvious multi-classes and how I would approach them. And we have some classics here. We have the Sorcerer, which is a Paladin Sorcerer. I'd be looking over a period of 20 levels to do Paladin 6, Warlock 1, Sorcerer 13. I would take Sorcerer at level 1 for the Constitution saving throw proficiency, unless I wanted to wear heavy armor for some reason, but then I have a strength requirement to consider. I'd consider my Warlock level at level 2 for Pact Weapon, then 6 straight in Paladin for Aura of Protection. I like Devotion here, and then go back to Sorcerer for the rest. Then there is the Sorlock, which is a Warlock Sorcerer, and I'd be looking at Warlock 3, Sorcerer 17. I'd take Sorcerer at level 1 for the Constitution saving throw proficiency, then I'd take all 3 levels in Warlock. I like Archfey here. I also like Chain Pact, Agonizing Blast, and Repelling Blast. The one tough thing here is we are going to wait a long time to get our first ability score increase, and that is going to be painful. But just keep in mind that if we do take a 4th level Warlock, we will never get 9th level spells. Then there is the multi-class Bard Sorcerer. Notice there's no special name for this one, because although Bard and Sorcerer both share Charisma as primary score, and a theoretical multi-class has full spell slot progression, the delay of higher level spells takes the shine off this possibility. If I was to go with this multi-class, I guess I would go primarily Bard, then dip some Sorcerer levels, just so I could do some meta magic. Something like a Bard 17, Sorcerer 3 would probably be quite good, because what I could do is with extra spells, I could feed them in to create more sorcery points to do more meta magic. I would probably do Bard 15, then Sorcerer 3, then the final 2 levels in Bard. And Wild Magic is a good choice here if I was to do that, because that advantage on initiative rolls would be good for that kind of character. Now here's a multi-class I probably never would have mentioned using the 2014 rules, but Rogue. Rogue is the only class that picks its primary ability score. I mean, officially, the primary ability score is Dexterity, but True Strike means that Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma can all be primary ability scores for a Rogue. In the case of a Sorcerer, this can be a massively powerful combination, since innate sorcery can provide advantage on every True Strike in a combat using 1 bonus action, or, in the case of Wild Magic, Tides of Chaos, which doesn't use a bonus action at all. And unlike Steady Aim, neither does it impact your movement. Freeing up that bonus action for other uses will be the most dramatic if we multi-class with the Thief subclass, because the Fast Hands feature at level 3 is going to allow us to use our bonus action to take the magic action to use magic items. With this kind of character, I'd be looking at starting with Rogue for 5 levels, then go for Sorcerer for 3, then back to Rogue for the remaining levels. You still get an epic boon feat at 19 with this progression, and you can go Sorcerer 4 at level 20, and you would get 2 epic boon feats. Gaining 3 levels in Thief for a character that is primarily Sorcerer is also tempting, though I'd probably do the 17 levels of straight Sorcerer first, then maybe 3 levels of Thief at the end, but doing so gives up your capstone and you're not going to get an epic boon feat. You could go 15 Sorcerer, then 3 Thief, then you take your last 2 levels in Sorcerer to get the epic boon feat, but you will be delaying your 9th level spells for a couple levels. Now, what if you only want to dip for 1 level for armor? Well, consider waiting till level 2 to pick up your armor dip in order to preserve your Constitution saving throw proficiency. Any armor dip that preserves your spell slot progression will need at least 1 ability score at 13 that you probably wouldn't have done otherwise. Or you could just say screw it and dip fighter at level 1, which is a perfectly valid option. So I'm going to talk about my personal experience here with Wild Magic. A while back, I made a video about a Paladin build that I'm currently playing that I will link up above. In that video, I mentioned that my understanding was the campaign was going to end at level 12. My DM has since clarified that he intends to extend that campaign right to level 20. I mentioned in that video considering multiclassing due to that change. And if you click the link to the character sheet in that video description, at least if you do it today, you're going to see that currently speaking, I am level 6 Paladin, level 1 Sorcerer. And yes, I've chosen Wild Magic Sorcery. There's actually an in-game tie-in to Wild Magic thematically that I think fits decently, but I'm not going to go into detail here in this video. But if the character does survive until level 9, and in this campaign there's no guarantees of that, then this will actually be my first extended campaign using Wild Magic Sorcery, and I am looking forward to that. And if new learnings come from that experience, you can bet I will share them with you. So that is my breakdown of the Wild Magic Sorcerer, and I need to thank my patrons who make these videos possible. If you would consider supporting this content, there's a link to my Patreon in the video description. Today I'd like to thank mage level patrons Mr. Wonderful, Babrak, Blue Wolf, John D, Darren Williams, David Michael Gregg, Descarpus9, El Conquistadorito, Avengi R, Phoenix, Hatap, Jared Huberger, John Wayne, Joseph Robideau, Wu Carl Kong, McSkill, Michael Michelle, Moxie Nemo, Paul Suzak, Phil Sokolov, Prometheo NTG, Big Chungus, Robert Riley, Shane and Todd Beyond, Simon Jester, Somnareel, Earshine, The Fantastic Emporium, Tyler Thorstrom, Zukrohob, and Wade. Thank you all so much for your support. And until next time, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.